We got called to the Grand Plaza Hotel 2 weeks ago. Big charity gala, black ties, champagne, cameras everywhere. We're always on standby for these events. Rich people, open bar, stress, heart attacks waiting to happen. But this wasn't a heart attack. This was a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. Harold Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Holdings, one of those billionaires who's always in the news talking about giving back. That night, he stood on stage in a $1,000 suit, microphone in hand, talking about hope for forgotten children. Then his phone started buzzing, then another phone, then another. I watched from the side of the room as his face changed. Confusion, then fear, then something close to terror. By the time the federal agents walked through those glass doors, he'd gone completely white. They arrested him on stage, in front of 300 people, in front of every camera in the city, let him out in handcuffs while the string quartet was still playing. That's when I saw her. A woman in a black dress, standing on the balcony above the chaos, completely still. She was holding a glass of champagne, watching him go, and she was smiling. Not a happy smile. Something colder. Something that looked like justice 25 years in the making. Let me tell you how this fire really started. Her name was Autumn Hayes. I didn't know that then. I learned it later, after everything came out, after the news broke, after the story spread, but the story really starts 25 years earlier, when she was 6 years old. The fire started just after midnight. Autumn's father was in his study. Her mother was reading in bed. Autumn was supposed to be asleep, but she'd snuck out to get water from the kitchen. That's what saved her. She heard her father shout something, a name. "Mitchell!" Then the smoke came. Her mother found her in the hallway, scooped her up, ran for the door. They made it out, barely. Her father didn't. He died trying to get the papers from his safe. Documents, he said, proved everything. But by the time the firefighters got there, the house was gone, the papers were gone, and so was Autumn's life. The official story was simple. Tragic accident. Electrical fire. No will found. No relatives. No money. 6-year-old Autumn Hayes went to St. Catherine's orphanage, and everyone moved on. Everyone except Autumn. 12 years later, the day before she turned 18, her teacher stopped her after class. Miss Caroline was the only adult at the orphanage who'd ever treated Autumn like a person. She taught literature. Sometimes she'd slip Autumn extra books. Sometimes she'd let her stay after school in the warm classroom instead of going back to the cold dormitory. That day, Miss Caroline's hands were shaking when she passed Autumn a sealed envelope. "Tomorrow you need to go to the notary's office downtown," she said quietly. "There's something you need to know about your parents' estate." Autumn felt something flicker in her chest. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. "Is there money?" she whispered. Miss Caroline didn't answer directly, just squeezed her hand. "Go tomorrow. Find out what's yours." The notary's office was on the 3rd floor of an old building that smelled like coffee and old paper. Autumn stood in front of the desk in her orphanage uniform, gray dress, worn shoes. She held the letter from Miss Caroline like a passport to a different life. The notary didn't look up when she walked in, just gestured to a chair. "Name?" he asked. "Autumn Hayes." He pulled a folder. Thin, too thin. He opened it, glanced at the single page inside, then pushed it aside. "No one left you anything," he said. His voice was flat, bored. The world seemed to stop. "I'm sorry," Autumn heard herself say. "No trust, no will, no property." He was already reaching for the next file. "Your records are clean, but you're not in any file of inheritance." Autumn stared at the folder he'd pushed aside. Her name was typed neatly on the tab. Autumn Hayes. Something about it felt wrong. Too light. Too deliberate. "Are you sure?" she asked. Her voice sounded small. He sighed, finally looked at her, and for just a second, one flicker of a second, she saw something in his eyes, recognition, guilt, something quickly buried. "Yes," he said, quite sure. A clock ticked somewhere behind him, too loud, too cruel. Autumn left his office with her hands shaking and silence burning in her throat. But silence, she learned that day, could sharpen into something deadly. She went straight back to St. Catherine's, ran up the stairs to Miss Caroline's room. The door was open. The room was empty. Her books were gone. Her desk was bare. Even her name was scrubbed off the door. Autumn stood there, staring at the empty space where Hope had lived 5 minutes ago. "Excuse me," a voice said behind her. The matron. Mrs. Brennan. Cold eyes, thin lips. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking for Miss Caroline," Autumn said. "Where is she?" Mrs. Brennan's expression didn't change. "There is no Miss Caroline here. You must be confused." "But she—" "You're mistaken," Mrs. Brennan said firmly. "Now go back to your dormitory." Autumn felt something click into place. A understanding, a certainty. Someone was lying, and someone had made Miss Caroline disappear. Over the next 2 years, Autumn became obsessed. She'd sneak into the orphanage office at night, go through files, donor lists, property records, anything she could find. That's when she saw it. Her name on a sponsor list. Mitchell Holdings, the company that donated to the orphanage. The same company that owned the orphanage building. The same company whose name made her stomach turn without knowing why. She started spending her free time at the public library, searching newspaper archives, looking for anything about her parents. About the fire. Most of the articles were standard: tragic accident, investigation closed, community mourns. But buried in a small column from 3 weeks after the fire, she found something else. Local businessman Harold Mitchell purchases fire site, plans commercial development. Harold Mitchell bought her family's ashes and built his empire on top of them. It took her 4 more years to find Miss Caroline. She was living in a small town 3 hours away. Teaching at an elementary school under a different name. Sarah Bennett. Autumn knocked on her apartment door on a Saturday afternoon. When Miss Caroline opened it and saw her, the color drained from her face. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, looking over Autumn's shoulder like someone might be watching. "You told me to find out what's mine," Autumn said. "So I did. Now tell me why you disappeared." They sat at a small kitchen table. Miss Caroline's hands were wrapped around a coffee cup she didn't drink from.
"Mitchell's lawyers came to the orphanage 2 days after you turned 18, she said quietly. "They told me I was interfering in matters that didn't concern me, that if I didn't leave, I'd lose my teaching license, that I'd never work again." "Why?" Autumn asked. "What did you know?" Miss Caroline stood up slowly, walked to her bedroom, came back with a small brass key. "Your father gave this to me the day before the fire," she said, pressing it into Autumn's palm. "He said if anything happened to him, I should keep it until you were old enough." "Old enough for what?" "Old enough to fight back." The safety deposit box was in a bank that had been bought and sold 3 times since her parents died. But the box number was still valid. Inside it, Autumn found 2 things. A will, signed by both her parents, dated 1 month before the fire, leaving everything, the house, the company, the assets, to their daughter, Autumn Marie Hayes.
And stapled to it, a letter on Mitchell Holdings' letterhead. "Mr. Hayes, this is your final notice. Sell the company to Mitchell Holdings by month's end or face foreclosure. Your debts will be called, your assets seized. Consider this your last warning." It was dated 2 weeks before the fire. Autumn sat in that bank vault, holding the proof that her parents hadn't died in an accident. They'd been murdered. Their deaths had been made to look like an accident. And a 6-year-old girl had been erased from existence so no one would ask questions. She didn't cry. She'd learned a long time ago that tears were useless. She folded the documents carefully, put them in her bag, and started planning. She changed her name legally, applied to university under a scholarship, studied law. The scholarship was funded by Mitchell Holdings Foundation. The irony wasn't lost on her. She let them pay for the weapon she'd used to destroy them. She worked hard, kept her head down, got perfect grades. No one noticed the quiet girl in the back of the classroom who stayed late in the library, studying corporate law with an intensity that should have been alarming. By 24, she'd been hired at Brennan and Associates, corporate audits, tax law, the kind of boring legal work that gave her access to everything. She made sure Mitchell Holdings became her specialty. The night she found it, she was alone in the office. 2 a.m. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. She'd been going through Mitchell Holdings' financial records for 3 months, transaction by transaction, account by account, looking for the crack in the facade. And then, buried in a subsidiary company's quarterly report, she saw it. An offshore account, funneling money that should have gone to charitable donations. Her hands were shaking as she pulled up the account details, traced the money back, and back, and back. Mitchell had been stealing from the orphanage fund for 15 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars meant for kids like her, kids whose parents were dead, kids who had nothing. He was stealing from them twice. Once when he killed their parents, again when he took the money meant to care for them. Autumn sat in that dark office staring at the screen. For the first time in 18 years, she smiled. She had him. She spent 8 months building the case. Not just the offshore accounts. Everything. The fire investigation that had been closed too quickly. The property transfer that happened too fast. The insurance payout that went to the wrong people. The will that was never filed. The notary who'd been paid to lie. All of it. Every thread, every lie, every buried truth. She leaked documents to journalists, filed anonymous tips with financial crime units, built a web of evidence that couldn't be ignored, and she timed it perfectly. Mitchell's annual charity gala, the night he stood on stage and pretended to care about forgotten children, the night he raised money for orphanages while stealing from them, that would be the night he fell. Autumn bought a black dress, simple, elegant, the kind of dress that cost more than she'd spent on clothes in her entire childhood. She stood in front of her mirror the night of the gala, looked at herself. 25 years of patience staring back. She wasn't that 6-year-old anymore. She wasn't that 18-year-old in worn shoes being told she was worth nothing. She was the fire they thought they'd put out. And tonight, she'd burn everything down. The Grand Plaza was exactly what she expected. Crystal chandeliers, string quartets, women in diamonds, men in suits that cost more than a year at St. Catherine's. Autumn walked in like she belonged there. Because she did. This was her father's money, her mother's legacy. They just didn't know it yet. She made her way to the balcony, found a spot where she could see everything, the stage, the crowd, Mitchell. He looked old, successful, comfortable, like a man who'd never had to answer for anything in his life. The speeches began, someone from the foundation, then a charity representative, then Mitchell himself. He walked to the podium with a smile that made Autumn's stomach turn, adjusted the microphone, looked out at the crowd like they were his children. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. His voice was smooth, practiced. "We're here to celebrate something important. Hope, second chances. The children who've been forgotten by society." Autumn's hands tightened on the balcony railing. "At Mitchell Holdings, we believe every child deserves a chance at a better life. That's why we've donated millions to orphanages across the state. That's why we're here tonight, to give back, to remember, to—" His phone buzzed, then another, then another. Autumn watched his face change, saw confusion flicker across it, then concern, then fear. People in the audience were checking their phones, whispers spreading like wildfire. The news was breaking, in real time, all of it. The stolen funds, the offshore accounts, the falsified records, everything. Mitchell looked down at his phone. His face went white. That's when the federal agents walked through the doors. Autumn lifted her champagne glass, took a slow sip, watched. The agents approached the stage, showed their badges, said something to Mitchell that she couldn't hear but could imagine. "Harold Mitchell, You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. The room erupted. Cameras flashing, people shouting. The string quartet stopped playing. They put handcuffs on him right there. On stage, under the lights, in front of everyone. As they led him toward the exit, he scanned the crowd desperately, looking for help, for an explanation, for something. His eyes landed on Autumn, standing on the balcony above it all, glass of champagne in hand, watching him fall. For just a second, their eyes met. He looked confused, like he almost recognized her, but couldn't place her. His lips moved. "Who are you?" Autumn raised her glass slightly, a small salute, and she mouthed 2 words. "The Forgotten." His face froze. Understanding dawning, horror spreading. Then the agents pulled him away, and he was gone. Autumn stood there for a long time after the crowd dispersed, after the press left, after the lights dimmed. She finished her champagne, set the glass down on the balcony railing, and walked out into the night. I didn't meet Autumn until 3 days later. She came by the station and asked if she could talk to me, said she'd heard I was there that night, that she wanted to explain. We sat in the station break room with terrible coffee, and she told me everything, not with satisfaction, not with joy, with exhaustion. "I thought it would feel different," she said quietly. "I thought when it was over I'd feel, I don't know, triumphant, vindicated." "How do you feel?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. "Empty," she said finally. 25 years of my life went into that moment, and now it's over. And I don't know who I am if I'm not chasing him anymore. "You're the person who brought a murderer to justice," I said. She smiled. Sad. "I'm the person who spent 25 years thinking about revenge. That's not the same as justice. Justice is clean. What I did..." She shook her head. "What I did was personal." We sat in silence for a while. "I bought back my parents' property," she said, "rebuilding the house. But I'm leaving one section of the original foundation exposed, charred brick, still black from the fire." "Why?" "As a reminder," she said, "of where silence ends, where justice begins, where Autumn Hayes stopped being a victim and became something else." "What's that?" I asked. She looked at me with those tired, determined eyes. "Someone who remembers." I saw her one more time, about a month ago. She was at St. Catherine's Orphanage, the building that Mitchell used to own, that she now owned. She'd turned it into something different. Not just an orphanage, a place where kids could learn, grow, have a future. She was reading to a group of kids in the library, 6 and 7 years old, same age she'd been when everything was taken from her. One of them asked her name. "Miss Autumn," she said, "and I'm here to make sure you're never forgotten." After the kids left, we talked for a few minutes. "How are you?" I asked. "Better," she said, and I believed her. "I'm learning how to live without rage. It's harder than I thought it would be. Rage is a good fuel, but it burns everything, including you. What do you run on now?" She thought about it. "Hope? Maybe. The kind Miss Caroline tried to give me 25 years ago. The kind I'm trying to give them." She nodded toward where the kids had been. Before I left, she showed me something on her office wall. A frame. Inside it, the letter from the notary. "No one left you anything." "Why keep it?" I asked. "Because he was wrong," she said simply. "They left me everything. They left me truth. They left me patience. They left me the fire." She smiled. "And I learned to use it without burning. I've been fighting fires for 18 years, and I've learned something about ashes. People think ashes are dead, the end of something, proof that it's over. But ashes are memory. They're evidence. They're proof that something was there. Something burned. Something mattered." Harold Mitchell thought he could erase Autumn Hayes. turn her into nothing, bury her under paperwork and lies and 25 years of silence. He thought if he killed her parents and took her inheritance and made her disappear into an orphanage, she'd just fade away, become nobody. But he forgot something fundamental about fire. You can't erase ashes. You can sweep them away, hide them, pretend they don't exist, but they're still there, under everything, waiting. Autumn waited. She turned her grief into patience, her rage into precision, her childhood trauma into a law degree and a perfect case. She didn't just expose Mitchell. She made sure the whole world was watching when he fell, made sure everyone saw what he'd done, made sure no one could forget. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about what happens when you underestimate someone, when you think powerless means harmless, when you forget that the child you tried to bury might grow up and remember. Autumn Hayes was 6 years old when Harold Mitchell killed her parents and stole her life. She was 18 when she learned the truth. She was 31 when she burned his empire to the ground. 25 years of patience, of planning, of turning herself into the weapon no one saw coming. Mitchell stood on a stage and talked about helping the forgotten, but he didn't understand what forgotten really means. Forgotten doesn't mean gone. It means waiting. And when the forgotten finally speak, the world has no choice but to listen. If someone ever tries to bury you with lies or silence or cruelty that says you don't matter, remember this story. You're not buried, you're planted. And ashes? Ashes remember. Stay safe out there.